At 5:23, the Gulf of Oman is almost motionless, then a warship's flight deck erupts in white fire. One missile rises, followed seconds later by another. 13 launches begin a strike designed to overwhelm the defenses waiting inland. Far beyond the horizon, an Iranian military compound begins its morning routine. Guards move between buildings, vehicles sit ready, and radio operators monitor their screens. None of them know that a salvo has already left the sea and is climbing toward their province. The launchers fire in rapid succession. Each booster punches through the morning air, leaving a bright column behind. The ship remains steady just long enough to complete the sequence, because every trajectory has been calculated around one dangerous requirement: timing. Then the final missile clears the deck. The captain orders the turn. The warship heels away, wake curling across the Gulf as its predictable launch heading disappears. 13 weapons are already committed, carrying the battle inland without needing another command from the ship. On the Iranian coast, the first radar operators detect the launch signatures. Bright returns appear against the background. The information is valuable, but detection is only the beginning. Someone must identify the tracks, estimate their paths, and move that warning through the defense network. An over-the-horizon radar provides the first broad picture. Its signal reaches beyond the coastline, but long-range detection cannot deliver perfect precision. The operators know missiles have launched somewhere offshore. They do not yet know exactly where every launcher is located. The warning travels inland. Another radar begins building a sharper picture, separating the incoming objects into individual tracks. 13 targets become visible. Altitude increases, speed rises, direction stabilizes. The defense finally understands the scale of the incoming formation. But knowing the missiles are coming is different from having a firing solution. Coordinates must be confirmed, commands must be passed, batteries must prepare. Every stage consumes seconds while the weapons continue covering hundreds of meters every second. Inside a surface-to-air missile battery, operators take their positions. Launch vehicles turn toward the approach corridor. Radar arrays sweep the sky. The crews know they may receive only one realistic opportunity to engage the formation before it descends beyond their most useful engagement envelope. The American salvo is built around concentration. Instead of arriving separately, the missiles approach the target area inside a tightly compressed window that forces the defenders to process multiple tracks simultaneously, creating a problem of capacity as much as technology. A single incoming missile gives a battery time to track, calculate, launch, and reassess. 13 targets change that equation. Interceptors become a limited resource. Radar channels become crowded. Every successful engagement still leaves more objects moving through the same corridor. High above the coastline, the missiles continue their climb. Their boosters burn hard, then begin to fade. The bright exhaust that revealed their position disappears as the weapons transition into the next part of their flight. For a moment, the sky becomes strangely quiet. There are no glowing plumes, only small objects carrying enormous speed below them. Roads and mountains slide across the landscape. Ahead lies the target area, still unaware of how quickly the situation is changing. The warheads begin descending from altitude. Their paths are no longer simple textbook arcs. Guidance systems continue correcting their course, shaping each approach toward a predetermined point while the defenders attempt to predict where those paths will end. On the ground, another radar acquires the descending formation. The tracks sharpen again. Operators call out altitude and direction. The battery commander now has enough information to act, but the engagement window is already narrowing. The first interceptor leaves its launcher with a violent flash. A second follows. Their smoke trails climb toward the leading targets as radar guidance begins shaping the intercept. For the crews inside the battery, calculation has become immediate action. 2 explosions appear high above the battlefield. The first pair of incoming weapons has been engaged for a brief moment. The defenders have achieved what they wanted. Then the remaining tracks continue descending, revealing the larger problem still approaching. Another pair of interceptors launches. The battery cycles through its engagement sequence as quickly as possible, but launch capacity is finite. Radar channels are finite. Ammunition is finite. 13 incoming tracks create a demand the battery cannot sustain indefinitely. The second engagement produces more airbursts. Fragments scatter through the upper atmosphere while additional warheads continue their descent. The defenders have scored interceptions, but the formation has not broken. The remaining targets are still moving toward the same battlefield. Now the missiles enter lower altitude. Their remaining flight time collapses rapidly. The defensive battery must shift from long-range engagement toward the final layer, where guns and short-range systems may have only seconds to react. Point defense crews receive the alert. Gun mounts begin traversing radar tracks. Move across their displays. Operators prepare to fire at predicted positions rather than chase the missiles directly, because at extreme speed, aiming behind the target means missing entirely. The gun's open tracers climb into the sky in concentrated streams. The compound becomes surrounded by flashes and smoke. The defense is firing everything it can place into the final approach corridor. The barrage fills the sky. Yet the geometry is unforgiving. A steeply diving missile crosses the sky faster than the gun mount can follow. The tracking system may predict the target, but the weapon must point there accurately before the window disappears. One incoming warhead slips through the final barrage. The compound lies directly beneath it. Almost no distance remains between the descending weapon and the structure it was assigned to hit. The final defensive layer has been defeated. The missile strikes the building before the defenders can fire again. The impact tears through the roof and upper structure with enormous kinetic energy. A heartbeat later, the delayed warhead detonates inside the building, magnifying the destruction within the confined space. Another impact follows across the compound, then another. Dust erupts from rooftops as vehicles and walls disappear behind expanding clouds. The attack now looks less like a single strike and more like a chain reaction moving through the target area. The remaining warheads continue arriving along separate approach paths. Buildings, support areas, and vehicles are struck in rapid succession. Each explosion adds another layer of dust and debris, obscuring the compound beneath a growing gray cloud. Then the barrage ends. The sky is suddenly empty. Only smoke, dust, and drifting debris remain above the target area. Emergency crews begin moving through the wreckage while commanders attempt to establish communications and determine which facilities remain operational. But offshore, the story continues. A second amphibious ship begins preparing another launch sequence. This time, the targets extend beyond the original military compound. The next salvo is aimed at infrastructure capable of influencing movement across the region. Missiles rise from the second ship in another rapid sequence. Their trajectories bend inland toward transportation and aviation infrastructure. The intention is broader than striking personnel: disrupt the systems that move equipment, supplies, reinforcements, and aircraft. A rail junction becomes a critical point in the scenario. Damage there could interrupt the flow of military logistics, forcing traffic onto slower alternatives. The effect would not end with the explosion. It could continue through repairs, rerouting, and delays. Another group of missiles heads toward an airfield. Runways, access routes, and support facilities represent another layer of military mobility. If those systems are disrupted, aircraft and heavier transports may face a much more difficult operating environment. Across the province, the defense network now has a second problem. Radar sites must keep watching, batteries must conserve ammunition, surviving launchers may need to relocate. Every response reveals information that the attacking force could potentially use later. The central lesson is becoming clearer. Modern missile warfare is not simply a contest between one missile and one interceptor. It is a network battle involving sensors, communications, command decisions, launch capacity, geometry, and the number of threats arriving simultaneously. At 5:28, the first wave has already changed the landscape. Smoke rises above the compound while crews begin assessing the damage offshore. The launch ships have disappeared from immediate view, leaving the defenders to reconstruct the attack from radar tracks and wreckage. The second wave demonstrates why infrastructure matters. Destroying a military facility can remove personnel or equipment, but disrupting transport and airfield access can influence what happens afterward. The battlefield extends beyond the original target into every route connecting the region. At 5:28, the first wave has transformed the compound. Dust rolls through damaged buildings while emergency crews search for survivors and assess communications. Smoke hides the destruction offshore. However, the launch platforms remain mobile. The attack has demonstrated that distance alone cannot guarantee safety, and that a defense can be overwhelmed when several threats arrive inside one compressed engagement window. The first phase is complete. The second ship begins its sequence while the first strike is being assessed. Missiles rise from the deck and turn inland toward transportation and aviation infrastructure. This changes the purpose of the operation. The objective is mobility itself, moving supplies, reinforcing units, operating aircraft, and keeping the battlefield connected under pressure. The next phase begins before the smoke has fully cleared, before another critical decision. A damaged rail junction can become more important than it looks on a map. If switching tracks are destroyed, military traffic may be forced onto slower routes, creating delays that spread. The same principle applies to an airfield. Runway repairs create immediate consequences, because aircraft and heavy transports depend on infrastructure that cannot be replaced overnight. Logistics becomes decisive. The disruption spreads across the region. Meanwhile, the Iranian defense network faces recovery. Radar operators continue searching for another launch missile. Batteries assess ammunition levels and relocate equipment. Commanders decide which targets deserve protection first. Movements create decisions. Transmissions create signals after a salvo. Defenders are not simply repairing damage, they are preparing for another attack that could arrive before the previous strike is understood. Pressure continues across the network today. The lesson is about architecture. A missile can be fast, but speed alone does not create an advantage. Sensors must find the launch, networks must distribute information, commanders must act, launchers must fire, interceptors must reach altitude. Every layer must work before weapons cross the defensive boundary. When several threats arrive together, weakness in one layer can affect the chain that is contest in warfare. Eventually, the Gulf becomes quiet again. Smoke thins above the coastline, ships remain offshore, and radar screens return to patterns. But the question remains, can a defense built around sequential reactions survive a battlefield where attacks are synchronized? Interceptor speed alone is not enough. Sensors, command networks, ammunition, geometry, mobility, and the ability to make decisions before the next wave arrives matter under pressure today.